excited to introduce the Bodybuilding Prep Plus Safer, Smarter, Stronger Eating Plan and our talk tonight to just learn about how you can reduce metabolic damage and increase physiological results.
I've been at this game for a couple decades at least, even before that as a professional athlete. Whether you're in power sport, aerobic, anaerobic, strength, finesse, when you get down to fueling the body, it boils down to some pretty simple principles. It works for both health and performance. I like to distinguish, human performance is pregnancy. Human performance is, better circulation for a diabetic. Human performance can mean more energy all day for parents. But when you get down to athletes understand what puts them on the field of play to perform and peak, if you will. But 99% of your time is spent in the training phase. And with bodybuilding, the prep phase, some funky things happen physiologically. Several years ago, I was working with the Tour de France athletes, and in the third week of the Tour de France, massive metabolic damage. Their hematocrit tanks, their immune system tanks, and they're very susceptible to a lot of damage in that third week. And a lot of guys don't finish strong. So I guess kind of the overall concept tonight is to finish strong for both your time on the stage and your the rest of your life, right? And health and performance are sort of heads and tails of the same conversation. When it comes to eating safer, eating smarter, eating stronger, kind of tonight's conversation around prep, you as bodybuilders go through some crazy days, weeks, months of putting your body to the test, challenging it physiologically, putting pressure on your metabolism. So let me make this pretty simple. In the bodybuilding world, everyone's familiar with macros, right? You got to get your macros: carbs, proteins, fats. Think of that as if you imagine an iceberg, okay? And the iceberg, 20% of that iceberg resides above the water, and that tends to be the prevailing conversation in sports nutrition, in dietary nutrition. I call it quantitative nutrition. Really kind of a math problem, if you will. But the macro conversation is not the nutrient-dense conversation. It's dense with calories, and it's dense with glycogen, and it's dense with amino acids. It's dense with those macronutrients. But if you understand the iceberg in that metaphor, that analogy, most of that iceberg resides beneath the water, 80%. And that's where nutrient density kicks in, and that's everything else. And what athletes kind of are catching up to, I guess, is what does all of that everything else do for my performance, do for my recovery, do for my ability to get on the field of play and perform. And so nutrient density involves, the 20th century terms of vitamins and minerals, but it includes enzymes and antioxidants and pre and probiotics and phytonutrients, which there's tens of thousands of those. Nutrient density is the rest of the iceberg, and it's really what gives whole foods their majesty, if you will. And I break it down pretty simple. If you understand that iceberg, now food kind of does three things. It delivers energy, and it builds matter, right? And that has to do with replenishing glycogen and then getting proteins and amino acids. And that's the above the iceberg part. The third part I call the blind spot, right? And it's conditioning physiological function. And that has to do with restoring these reservoirs of microbes, restoring the reservoirs of phytochemicals. And so that's kind of point number one is understanding that the power of nutrient density. But what does it actually do when it gets in the body? How does that help me perform, and how can that help me during prep? And that is merely a question of food does things to the body over time. And those microbes, they don't have any calories, but there's tens of thousands of those molecules that interact with your biology, the biochemistry, and then help your metabolism perform. So what does that look like? It's reduction of oxidative damage, improvement of immune system strength, stronger vascular capacity, protection of DNA damage, protection of the oxidation of lipids in your bloodstream. When you get into metabolic damage, low energy, compromised immune system, poor digestion, gut health, hair falling out, skin issues, cramping, joint aching, cognitive function, brain fog, cellular dysfunction, all that body gone wrong, breaking bad, if you will, that metabolic damage, that is when you're kind of in the depths of your hardest part of your training, where you're cutting calories, but you're still trying to maintain that level of activity. that puts pressure on the body, and that pressure can compromise your ability to perform. And so with that as sort of context, where athletes fall short is in the execution. The athletes tend to approach nutrition with, improvisation and frivolity, but I will say that bodybuilders, more than probably any other sport, are very aware of what they eat, but they tend to be only aware of what they eat as it relates to the sort of the macro narrative. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Yanni and Danny and just let them tell you their bodybuilding story here for about a minute each.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm so honored to share my story. Thank you for thinking of me. Hey, we're in Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas. I started my journey back in 2014. In all honesty, it did not start as a bodybuilding journey. It started as a woman who had tried to have some babies and put on over 100 pounds with each pregnancy that went full term. And before I knew it, I really didn't recognize the woman that was looking back at me in the mirror. So I knew I needed to make some changes to my lifestyle, and I started slow. I started exercising, started making healthier choices in the lifestyle. And eventually I started losing weight on my own, and my passion for exercise, and really honestly at the time it was all vanity. My body was making huge changes, and I fell in love with how well I was able to change that. I had a trainer approach me, talk to me about bodybuilding. I was like, have you seen the size of those suits? I don't think so. Take another look at me and let's rediscuss this whole conversation, because I don't think I'm ever getting into one of those bikinis. Well, lo and behold, I did a show in 2016, 2 in 2017, another one in 2018, and then debuted in figure. And then in 2019, I stuck with figure, and we're in 2020 now, and I'm looking at the new wellness division. I'm pretty excited.
All right.
Yeah, so I fell in love. I fell in love with the sport. I fell in love with the ability to manipulate my diet and my workout routine to make my body look a certain way. And
That's
the
great.
science behind it has really intrigued my mind so much that I've completely made a career change. Now I'm a personal trainer, and I love helping other women get their sexy back, is what I call it.
Thank you. Thank you. And as an NPC competitor, kind of the next evolution is to get your pro card. And here we have a pro tonight in Danny Reardon, and you are a former IFBB pro. Tell us your story, Danny.
My story started when I was 15. My high school, for whatever reason, put on a bodybuilding show. So that's when I first started to dip my toe into it. And then a couple years later, I was 19, competing in the NPC. Figure was my first thing as well, because they didn't have physique yet. And then once they brought out physique, I kicked off the heels and I started doing front double biceps, and I found my spot. I was so excited. I couldn't wait to do a front double bicep. And then so from there, I did women's physique, got my pro card. I was 22 at the Olympia by 25. And I completed at the Olympia for 3 years. There I got 4th, 2nd, and then 6th. And I also competed at the Arnold Classic, and I got 2nd there as well. So my journey has been so long and so deep. It's almost hard to just condense it all into one little thing. But there it is now. And my last show was about 2.5 years ago, Olympia 2017. And now my journey is taking on a whole new turn, and I'm so excited about it. So I created a contest prep masterclass. So now I am taking the seat of the teacher, and I'm sort of shedding light on all different competitors and helping them achieve their dream, but in mind, body, spirit.
Her Instagram handle is little monster. Why is it that the bodybuilding community has only kind of been focused on the macro conversation, and sort of, the caboose in this whole conversation is nutrient density? Why have they missed that part of the human performance eating?
Yeah, so it just seems like everybody is very exterior focused, sort of like they're out for the big picture. And I think the industry as a whole is kind of starting to wake up to this. But previously, I think everybody was really concerned about protein, fat, and carbs, because that's what got you to stage, that's what got you lean, and that's what you paid your coaches for. And so I think that everything was sort of macro focus and exterior, and there wasn't a whole lot of people weren't really concerned about health. Like, I don't know if you know, but bodybuilding isn't the healthiest thing in the world. We bring our bodies to extremes, and we want to get as lean as possible with keeping as much muscle as possible. And many people don't associate that with micronutrients. They associate that with protein and carbs, and very little carbs. And I think there are many things changing in the industry now, even in the way that we diet. So, I just think it's something that was overlooked because it wasn't like the thing that got you to stage. And it didn't matter if you didn't feel good and if you had low energy during your contest prep, because that's not where you were here for. You're here to get on stage and to get lean and get the job done. And now we're starting to be like, oh, so we can feel better through this whole thing. Like, we can have good digestion and so all of these new things I think are coming to the surface now.
Well, what if you could have all the upside and none of the downside, right?
Oh my gosh, that would be a perfect world. And now
Well,
I feel like maybe we can.
Imagine that. So, Yana, what's your perspective on that? What are the conversations that you've been experiencing? Has it been predominantly macro focused with not even paying attention to micros?
I agree with Danny 100%. Every coach that I've ever worked with and had a pleasure of talking to, it's 100% about proteins, carbs, and fats. Proteins, carbs, and fats. That's the only thing anybody cares about. Nobody addresses macronutrients. Maybe occasional coaches will address isolated vitamins or minerals, like you should take maybe this or take that or supplement with this, but no one talks about micronutrients at all. Like what Danny was saying, as we cycle down through prep, I mean, gosh, fruits get cut out. I think I was only allowed in all my preps maybe half a cup of berries, and towards the last 6 weeks, even that gets cut out. So, I mean, talking about no fruit in the system whatsoever, and the amount of vegetables, I mean, even that was different for me. I mean, I didn't need a variety of color. I mean, it was pretty much celery, spinach, asparagus. I mean, that's pretty much what you're sticking with. And no high upper level conversations about why aren't we having carrots, or, it's just, I never asked those questions. As a bodybuilder, my coach said, that's what we do. I followed the plan.
Walk us through kind of your prep life, Danny, and what physiological challenges, what physiological damage, what are the issues? You sent me this long sort of list of all of the things that kind of the downside that you have dealt with over the years. Bring those to life for people.
Okay, so there are, well, many of them, and a lot of it you just kind of push through because you feel like you're just tired and fatigued, and that's the state and prep where you are, so you should feel this way. But I remember just having like super low energy, and kind of like Yana said, like there's not a whole lot of color on your plate. It's very specific, and so even if you are eating veggies, you're probably only eating the same 4 veggies all of the time. And I never got strawberries on my diet. So that's awesome. Yeah, it was just, so some of the things that would happen, like I noticed my immune system would actually start to drop the closer that I got to prep. So I would start to get cold sores, and I would notice that I would get sick very easily. So my immune system was low, and I could tell that right away. And especially because we're working out all the time and our bodies are in recovery mode. So our bodies are trying to repair itself constantly because all we do is wake up and train and wake up and train. And so by doing that, it doesn't leave a whole lot left for our immune system. So low immune system, low energy, poor digestion and gut health. That's huge because, again, we're only concerned about a couple, little bit of food. And everybody, I remember my gut being kind of messed up before and then even way after, because you start to eat regular food and your body's like, what is this Oreo I haven't had in 16 weeks? So digestion, skin. Whenever we're deficient in micronutrients, our skin starts to either get dry and cracky or get acne. Like our body starts to kind of freak out. Brittle hair. I remember that happening. And I feel like cognitive function. So like, as you start to get closer to show day, your calories are pretty low and your work is pretty high. So the way that your brain thinks, I feel like you can kind of get a little loopy. Like people even have coined it prep brain, because you just are kind of off. Like you're just not all firing on all cylinders. You can train and you can eat, but that's it. So I just find that so there was a lot of physiological things that were starting to decline, other than like we were maintaining muscle. That was number 1, and getting lean. That was number 2. Everything else was, well, suck it up and train.
Yeah. And that's going to seem like that's the badge of courage for the whole process sometimes. And I will say in many trainers here in Colorado's defense that there's less of the, hey, here, eat tilapia and asparagus and call me in 6 weeks. Not seeing as much of that. Actually seeing some implementation. I think there can always be more, and that's why I'm excited to explore this topic with you and our athletes tonight, Jeff, because I think there's so much more that can be done. But the reason why it's been this way for so long is because it's worked. Because the whole goal is to get on stage and look like this, and that's worked. And part of it is almost like a pride. Would you say to Danny, like, you know, we suffered, you have to suffer, you know what I mean? So it's almost like part of the initiation or the process that's required, and it does work, but could it be better?
Well, yeah, there's a culture, and the suffering culture, it's the same in the bike culture, any sport, you know, you kind of get your game on, and I worked harder than you, I suffered more than you. So I get that mindset, but we're in the 21st century now. And I guess that the proposition is, how do you get the upside and less downside, right? And so Yana, what was your experience during prep physiologically, and some of the challenges and damages that you experienced?
I agree with Danny 100%. In my very first prep, I came down with pneumonia, and I ended up having to completely reschedule my show for a whole nother, I was out. My whole lung was filled. My second lung was halfway. I was on shots twice a week coming into the office. They wanted to admit me, but I had kids. I didn't get into the bodybuilding game till I was almost 35. So a little older, hoping to go to nationals when I'm 40. Pneumonia was one of the things that was in my very, very first prep.
Wow, that's brutal.
Had that, dropped out of prep, 12 weeks of recovery there, and then jumped back into, you know, building a little bit. And then we went back into prep, and that's when I finally got to show in July. But that following year, I will tell you, I remember I showed at, I actually was living in Kansas at the time. So my coach at the time was out of Colorado. So we went to the Colorado State Cup as a team. And so I competed in that show, and then I jumped back into prep afterwards and showed again in like November. And so 2 back-to-back preps, about 12, 16 weeks apart. And it wasn't until the second prep that I started noticing my skin started breaking out pretty badly. And something I had never really experienced before. Real deep, painful, horrible looking acne. Anyway, I was like, what's going on with my skin? And there was really not a whole lot of conversations about what was going on, but I couldn't go to the bathroom. So I was physically going to a clinic to get things taken care of there with the process that they do at a spa. But, you know, it was just horrible. And I fast forward into 2018, I was seeing a dermatologist. They were putting me on all sorts of stuff, and I couldn't get rid of this deep cystic acne. I mean, it was horrible. I mean, so same thing there, like getting sick, immunity levels low, really bad acne, brain fog, fatigue, all that stuff everybody tells you is normal. The brain fog and the fatigue, they're like, your coach will tell you that's normal. You got to suck it up. It's part of prep. Just suck it up and keep going. But when you're raising a family at the same time, it's hard. You know, you're looking for your keys and they're in the fridge, and you can't find your phone, but you were talking on it at the same time and you're looking for it. Like, life is crazy. So that brain fog is real. Prep brain, girls talk about it all the time. And it's a real thing. It really is a thing. And I'm so glad that this last prep that I went through, I didn't have any of that. So
that's a great transition. So how do we keep all the upside and do what you do in your sport and use some applied science, right? The science on this stuff has left the station. And one of my professional goals is to help any and all athletes in any sport kind of catch up to the science, to understand that, look, if you want to improve recovery, improve the adaptive response, build what I call physiological durability, this has to do with micros. But you have a very specific dietary regimen in bodybuilding. How do you get it done? How do you increase your nutrient density? And walk us through kind of the other side. Now you're kind of on the other side of your journey. How are you increasing your nutrient density while pursuing kind of the dietary regimen of a bodybuilder?
the science is there. You know, you got to eat more whole foods. You got to eat more plants. But like you said, how do you fit that into your macros when you know you can only eat so much? I was fortunate that I was introduced to this amazing powdered plants. I mean, it's literally in a powdered form. It's 0 macros, so it doesn't mess with any of my macros. I was able to take it all prep long. I started on it 2018, around April of 2018.
How has your recovery been? Your ability and capacity to recover and respond.
It's been amazing. And I will tell you too, I'm after hernia surgery. So I've had a hernia surgery back in end of December, and I'm back in the gym 3 weeks in, and I'm actually lifting heavier right now than I was lifting before I even amazing as far as my recovery. I'm not as tired. I feel like I have energy. I'm not napping through the day like I used to. I can keep up with my kids, and my sleep is amazing. That's the one thing that I didn't mention in the thing before, but I used to have a trouble sleeping. I used to have to take a bunch of stuff to help me go to sleep. I took some amino PMs, then I switched to, melatonin, and I haven't had to take any of that stuff. I mean, sleep is so important for recovery, and I think that that's really made the biggest difference right there. It's been a blessing for us. I mean, absolute blessing to be able to take something that's in a powder form that doesn't screw up with my macros. It was a no-brainer for us.
Thank you, Yana. That's great. How about you, Danny?
I'm not actively competing right now. However, I am still working out and training. So this has been a really cool bridge of the gap for me. So I'm getting a lot more nutrients in now than I probably ever have. And now that I kind of wish I had this mentality and these plant powders when I was competing, because I do feel like my immune system would have been better. My recovery would have been better. My mental state about wanting to put healthy things into my body, being concerned about health and what's going on the inside, would have also been better as well. But now that I'm, more concerned about that these days, my training sessions are awesome. My recovery is great. My endurance is great. Everything. And the brain fog, I really don't have anymore. I feel like I'm really on top of it a lot. And I notice if I don't take my plant powders, I notice it later in the day. I'm like, something's weird. And it's because I didn't take my plant powders. And that to me is really, really cool. And I actually have some clients who have been taking them who are competitors, who are noticing that they're having great preps. Their energy is high. They feel so good inside and out. And their recovery is better. They're like, I'm literally stronger and I can train more. And so for me, it's just a really great thing to be behind right now, because I just want to make people's experience better on stage. And so if a plant powder can do it, I'm all about the plants and the fruits and veggies. So the more, the better.
One of the goals for tonight was to introduce kind of attendees to this category of plant powders. You've got your protein shakes, you got your creatine, or your amino acids, whatever other stuff you're using. Bodybuilders use a lot of supplementation. Plant powders can be supplemental food, right? Think of it as a supplemental food. And so as a category, what it allows you to do is cram what I call more matter that matters into your body without the calories. So the calories, it's just the remaining matter if you were to juice produce, fruits and vegetables, and remove it. And so that category, I think, is new to the bodybuilding community. And what I've seen it done over the last 10, 15 years in my experience for athletes, it's helped them recover stronger, build the adaptive response, and condition physiological durability. Food does things to the body over time, and to condition physiological function, that's playing the long game. And if you're playing the long game, you can still play a short game in sport, but understand that you need your physiological health first before you can have your sports performance, right? If you want to learn more about using plant powders in your dietary pursuits to improve your safety, to improve your sort of smarts, if you will, to understand, just get with the person that invited you here tonight. Reach out to Yana, reach out to Jeff, reach out to Danny or myself, and we can get you more information on that. We can go down the rabbit hole and give you all the science, and you can poke the bear and have fun with that.
What I'm hearing both Yanni and Danny saying is that there were a lot of negatives and they didn't want to stop obviously, I know, Danny, you're not still competing, but you're working with athletes that are. So I know you want to have them have a better experience than you had, if that's possible. So I love the fact that we're pushing the envelope to be able to create an experience with the same result on stage, but a better result metabolically. Because ultimately this, you know, I have selfish goals as well, because I feel that there's too many women in particular that have quit the sport. They had a great experience at one of my events, 100%, a great experience with the training and their trainer, but the food was so hard, and what it did to their bodies was so difficult and unpleasant that they just don't want to do it again. They want to be there again. And so the few people that I do know that have experienced some of the things that both of you athletes have today, Yanni and Danny, is that they love competing. They're not doing 900 calorie diet. I mean, it makes me so angry when I talk to an athlete who got some Instagram trainer that's an influencer that puts them on a 900 calorie a day diet and has ruined their metabolism, and they're not competing it. They're actually hurting my business, and I have no control over that. So if I can get out there with some positive information that can help, particularly women, because I talk with more women about this, but even men can start going, hey, wow, this doesn't have to suck, and your calories don't have to be ridiculous, and when you're taking care of yourself, you don't get sick as much. And that's a pretty big deal, because that's a complete deal breaker in the show process. So I'm excited about the whole concept. I love hearing from both athletes and how they've had a measurable change. And I sure wish you were still competing, Danny. Would you consider it just one more time? Maybe the possibility?
I have a little bit. So many people ask me all the time, and I'm like, so right now I'm having so much fun putting energy into all of the athletes that I'm working with. And you know how it is when you're competing at a high level like that, like you have to just be so tunnel vision. So when the time comes and the stage calls to me again, I very well may go, because Yana, I do know that if you are a little bit older on stage, your muscles are denser, they're more mature, you can get leaner. So there are some benefits to being a little bit older on stage. So I'm taking note. But thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that. And it runs across my mind more often than not.
I know it does, because you're a true athlete, and it's great to see you in business now, really helping some other people, because I mean, ultimately that's why we're all doing this. We love it. We love the sport, and we love people. You know what I mean? So it's a great way to interact and kind of see the things that they're going through, things that you did. And so I love seeing that. And I can experience, I mean, I can understand your experience of training athletes and getting them excited. So good luck with your business there for sure. Jeff, how about you give us a little wrap up as far as how people can get in touch with you specifically. Talk a little bit more about how they can take that next step and maybe get some measurable results doing something a little bit different.
Thanks, Jeff. And I want to thank Yana and Danny for tuning in tonight. Thank you, Jeff, for participating. You know, one of my professional goals for the last, 15 plus years is to help, as I said, pull sports nutrition into the 21st century. Athletes are ruthlessly practical. They will do what works. And, that cultural mindset of suffering, actually suffering ended my athletic career. I trained so hard that I broke my body and I couldn't compete anymore. So I was always one of the hardest workers. I was not always one of the smartest workers. And what I realized, if you can work as hard as anyone and work smarter than anyone, that's sort of the invitation for those of you that want to learn more. You can have all the game and have all the upside, but food is a weapon. And it is a weapon of mass vitality, a weapon of mass destruction. And when you don't have it, especially on the nutrient-dense side, the body breaks bad. And certainly when you're in the belly of the beast in your sport, that's when you need nutrient density the most. So plant powders, for me, I've been pounding them 20 years. They make sense to me. I recover better. I'm middle-aged. I play soccer with 20-year-olds. And so if you're playing the long game, understand that what if I could show you a way to recover better or faster, stronger? You can push your body harder and recover better. That's a performance advantage. And so with that, get with the person that invited you here tonight. You can reach out to me on Facebook or Instagram, Jeff Olson. Just Google me, you can find it. Or reach out to Jeff Taylor as well. He can get you in touch with me. But I will leave you with this. Tonight was really an introduction to this whole idea of nutrient density in your sport as a power tool to help you level up. And this was kind of panel discussion number one. We're going to do another panel probably here at the end of March. I had the good fortune as an athlete to have sponsorships, cash sponsorships when I was a professional athlete. But that was in the 20th century when we had radio, print, and TV. Now the distribution of messaging is 1,000 points of light, and that whole game has been flipped up. The script has flipped. And athletes used to rent. I used to rent out my influence, right? I would rent it out for cash. That game is still in play, and if you could get it, great, do it all day long. But here's what athletes have. Athletes have influence. And if you step outside the bodybuilding bubble, well, you can be a biking bubble, a bodybuilding bubble, a ski bubble, whatever your sport, you have a bubble. If you can get outside the bubble, you as an athlete are a center of influence in your tribe, in your community, in your office, in your family, in your neighborhood. And people look to you to be walking the talk of health. And so that influence in today's social media age has an economic value. So our next webinar series, we're going to talk about what I call Sponsorship Plus. And what we try to do with Sponsorship Plus is help athletes perform better and own their influence and make a bigger impact in the world. So with that, we'll leave it on the field of play. God bless.